Okay, let's just drop you right into the middle of a prehistoric monsoon, where your dying fire is literally the only thing keeping you and your family alive. Picture this. It's the dead of night, and rain is hammering the earth so incredibly hard you can't even hear yourself think. The stakes? Well, they could not possibly be higher.
Now, we usually assume our ancestors just banged some rocks together whenever they needed a spark, right? But what happens when the rain doesn't stop for weeks, and you just can't make a fire? Scientists have actually documented real, historically studied human societies living in some of the heaviest monsoon rainfall on Earth, who survived for thousands of years without ever knowing how to make a fire from scratch. Not once. So how on earth did they survive the wet season?
To really get this, you have to imagine you were there. You're huddled under a rock overhang. You are absolutely soaked to the bone, just listening to the rain hiss against your dwindling coals. In this exact scenario, you know that a dead fire doesn't just mean you're going to be a bit chilly. No, it starts a terrifying biological countdown for your life. Because you face immediate physical danger. In fact, your body already knows this number, 25. Wet skin loses heat a staggering 25 times faster than dry skin. When you're sitting in a cold, windy downpour, you don't just shiver. Your core temperature plummets, your hands completely stop working, and hypothermia begins to accelerate rapidly. So, when that flame dies in the rain, 3 survival clocks start ticking all at once. First, the cold, which, as we just saw, can kill you in hours. Second, the predators. Big cats and hyenas are calculators, and that fire is your light shield. It tells them you aren't an easy meal. If the fire dies, the math flips, especially since heavy downpours mask a predator's sound and scent. And third, the food. Ancient human bodies depended on cooking to unlock calories hidden in raw food. Our brains literally grew large because of it. A dead fire means these 3 clocks are all running, making it an absolute death sentence.
And this reality completely shatters the Hollywood myth of just rubbing sticks together. I mean, modern survivalists struggle to make friction fire in perfect dry conditions. In a monsoon where the air itself is so thick with water that everything on Earth is soaked like a sponge, finding these absolute bone-dry requirements, it's completely impossible. You could spin that wet stick until your hands bleed and you will get nothing. You cannot make a new fire.
Section 1. The Keeper's Science. Engineering against the rain.
You know, we tend to think of early humans as just grunting cavemen, but they were brilliant engineers who had to become obsessive firekeepers. You might look at ash and think it's just garbage, right? The sad end of a fire? But to a prehistoric firekeeper staring down a night of storms, ash was phenomenal, water-resistant armor. Instead of fighting to keep big, hungry flames alive, which are a massive target for rain, they would bury glowing red coals under a thick mound of ash. This process, called banking, chokes the oxygen and puts the living coals into a power-saving mode that basically laughs at the worst downpours. Come morning, you just brush off the wet crust, feed it dry tinder, and the fire rises right back from its grave.
And this brilliant Stone Age material science extended right to their fuel. If you drop a novice in a rainforest, they're going to pick up wet wood from the ground, wood that's been drinking rain for weeks. It just hisses and chokes your fire. But ancient experts knew to harvest standing dead wood, branches still attached to upright trees, drained by gravity, and often sporting a completely dry inner core. They'd also seek out resin-soaked fatwood from injured trees, which is basically nature's pre-soaked fuel. It burns incredibly hot, even when it's damp.
The engineering didn't stop at the wood, though. It extended to the actual hearths. They knew water doesn't just fall from the sky, it sheets across the ground. So they built raised platforms with stones that doubled as radiators to outsmart the floodwaters. They positioned their hearths in the exact sweet spot near cave mouths, close enough to vent out toxic smoke, but far enough in to shield against wind-driven rain. They even built angled windbreaks out of stone or brush to protect the coals from projectile raindrops. Avoiding a drowned fire took genuine, deliberate architectural planning.
Section 2. Moving the flame. Carrying fire through the downpour.
So, what happens when the floodwaters rise and you have to move your entire tribe through the storm? You obviously can't leave the fire behind, and we actually have physical proof of how they solved this. The stunning discovery of Ötzi the Iceman, who melted out of the Alps back in 1991, showed us exactly how trusted ember carriers transported living fire on the move. He carried this incredibly ingenious waterproof birch bark container. Inside, glowing charcoal was wrapped in fresh green leaves to throttle the oxygen. These keepers march through violent alpine storms, hunched over, literally carrying their tribe's entire future clutched right to their chest. Their absolute secret weapon for this was a specific fungus, Fomus fomentarius, better known as tinder fungus. This stuff is an entire Stone Age technology all on its own. When prepared correctly, this spongy, horsehoof-shaped mushroom catches a weak spark and simply refuses to die. It doesn't burst into fragile flames. Instead, it smolders slowly like a cigarette, completely unfazed by damp, heavy, rain-soaked air. It could carry a smoldering heartbeat through an entire day of wet season marching. Section 3. The Earliest Diplomacy. Social Structures of Survival. Because you see, all that brilliant material science still requires one incredibly fragile thing: a human being actually awake to watch the flame. Researchers studying traditional societies noticed this fascinating staggered sleeping pattern they call the sentinel effect. Basically, across any given night, someone is always naturally awake. Youths stay up late in the early night, adults take the middle of the night, and elders wake up before dawn. This is a natural night watch written right into our biology that ensured the flame was never left unguarded from the sky for even a single minute.
But here is a detail that genuinely gives me chills. What if the fire watcher failed? What if a tribe's fire did drown? Well, the answer is that they would travel through the storm to rival camps, sometimes even to strangers they feared, to beg for embers. And the crazy thing? The other tribe would almost always share. Why? Because next monsoon, it could easily be them. This formed humanity's very first long-distance diplomatic network, an unspoken agreement that refusing to share fire in a storm meant death for everyone.
Section 4. The Andaman Payoff, an unbroken chain of fire.
So let's finally solve that incredible mystery I mentioned at the very beginning about those isolated islanders in the Bay of Bengal. The Andaman Islands have some of the most relentless, rain-hammered monsoon seasons on the planet. Yet, when 19th century outsiders first studied these isolated tribes, they were shocked to learn a massive secret. These human beings could not create a spark from scratch. If you handed them perfectly dry sticks and asked for a flame, they just couldn't do it. Yet they always had fire. How?
They pulled this off by surviving an endless relay race against the sky. They mastered every single technique we just covered through this explainer: ash banking, ember carrying, hollowing out completely waterproof spaces. This means a child in that tribe could literally warm their hands on a living chain of fire that their great-grandparents had guarded through violent storms centuries prior. Some groups were so good at keeping fire, they simply skipped ever needing to learn how to make it in the first place.
Section 5. The Evolutionary Echo. We are creatures of the flame. As we look back at the profound ways this brutal survival obsession shaped us, it turns out we kind of have our own history entirely backwards. We usually imagine that early humans built shelters and then one day decided to put a nice cozy fire inside them. The absolute opposite is true. We built our shelters, our fortresses of stone, brush, and eventually timber around our stolen flames, specifically to protect them from the rain. The flame came first. The home came second.
And I want to leave you with this final, mind-blowing thought, straight from the data. Scientists have actually measured this. When you sit near a campfire, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate slows down, and your body calms in a way almost nothing else can replicate. That deep sense of peace you feel, that is an evolutionary echo. It is hundreds of thousands of years of your successful ancestors' DNA whispering to you that the fire is lit, the rain can't hurt you, and you're completely safe from the storm tonight. You're only here because they never let the flame die. So what other ancient echoes are still whispering to us today? Keep that in mind next time you light a fire.